Welcome to Helping Organizations Thrive. Today I have the great pleasure of Dorel Iosif, all the way from Australia. Welcome, Dorel.
Thank you very much, Julian. Nice to be with you.
Yeah, it's good to see you. It's your evening, it's my morning, but it's great that we could connect and talk today. I'm just going to tell our audience a little bit about you. You are the managing partner of Lavaux Global, along with being the CEO and board director of Cognisium. You've held several sort of senior executive roles within many consulting firms like PwC. You are the member of the Harvard Business Review Advisory Council, and you've worked in many countries, obviously Australia, USA, Europe, and the Middle East. And yes, welcome today. And what I always ask all my guests, because I'm really nosy and a little bit curious really as being a coach, is to what do you love about what you do?
First of all, I love what I do because I feel I do the stuff I'm passionate about within the bounds of my value system and contributing to the success of others, but whether it's an individual or a business as a whole. And so I switch between being a teacher of leadership, a strategist, a mentor, an entrepreneur, which leads me to impact one individual talent or a business, as I said, as a whole. So I'm passionate about helping others to achieve their goals. I'm also free of any cognitive dissonance, which is always a good thing. I cannot imagine myself working for big tobacco. And I am engaged in dialogues and topics that matter, be that energy, strategy, leadership, or talent transformation. I'm happy with the answers I'm giving to questions. Is this meaningful to me? Am I impacting someone in a positive way? Will this project make me happy? So someone said to me many years ago that you'll reach a point in your career when you'll be working for your eulogy rather than resume. And I realized that he was right. So I've been working in academia, research, engineering, consulting, and management consulting. But in the last decade or so, my career suffered an evolutionary adaptive transformation toward strategy consulting, which is indeed a broad field. But so my interest lies at the nexus of strategy, open innovation, and organizational design. When we created Cognisium, that came as a result of asking some questions. How do companies, in particular SMEs, how do they innovate? How much access they have to open innovation? And I hope to talk a bit about that concept later. And how do they incorporate that within company strategy? What type of talent it takes to build an ambidextrous organization? So these are all the good questions, and I want to be part of that dialogue. And I guess the last comment I will make to this question is that you hear lately, some of the discourse today. You think that the business community was dormant for 200 years, and we only opened our eyes recently and decided to transform because of this technological explosion. But that's not true. Business transformation took place hundreds of times in history, at times actually more aggressive than others and more aggressive than today. So this is not something new. We're just answering different calls on the same theme. And I enjoy being part of that dialogue.
Brilliant. Well, clearly you're passionate about business, and you're passionate about learning and sort of bringing value to people. And we want to tap into that today. We've had a year or so of pandemic where I think a lot of organizations have gone almost thrown away their 5-year strategic plans, and perhaps even that word strategy is big gone. It's gone very tactical. Let's look at 90 days or 30 days. And but I think now there's a time to start to, I guess, think a bit more about being more strategic. And I just want to get your views on that, really, in the context of where we're at and how you view sort of strategy within organizations right now, and how you can sort of bring some insight into that.
Yes, this is a great question because I think strategy sits in its various form at the core of everything what we do as a business. So for many years, the average strategy or corporate development staff will engage once a year in a corporate-led strategic planning process. Note that I use the word strategic planning, not necessarily strategic thinking, which is indeed what one should be doing. But even today, people still use the 5 forces framework developed by Mr. Porter in the 90s, and they analyze these forces, they divide a strategy. But markets are not what they used to be. The rents are derived differently. In the past, the economists will tell you the rents used to be derived from a sector or industry privileged position, right? They call it Ricardian rents. Today, the rents are derived from Schumpeterian rents. So markets are amorphous and fluid. Some disappear, others emerge. Sometimes we can't even tell who the competitors are. And Porter assumed these factors are knowable and defined, but they are not, at least not anymore. So let's not confuse risk with uncertainty. And I've seen many strategic plans in my work. Most of them are goals and objectives rather than strategy. Others don't come from thinking, but rather from planning. So in many workplaces today, experts, we are living in challenging times. So experts are not so forward in terms of challenging institutionalized thinking. They are happy to have a job in tough time. So it becomes a question of leadership and culture. And that is to encourage courageous conversations about strategy in uncertain times, experimentation, and so on. So, for instance, the experts on demand can do that because in the competitive game, you need to have access to creative insights. You need to sense far into the ecosystem, not just in the immediate vicinity of your industry or sector. You need to employ abductive research.
Dorel, you're saying we shouldn't rely just what our talent is within our organization in terms of how we think right now. We should be pooling our resources externally. You're saying sort of get more expertise in from other areas to really help us in that thinking. And as you're saying that more people are doing the planning, but they're not doing the thinking bit beforehand. And so is that what you're saying in terms of that? Start with the thinking. And I guess, how do we go about that? How do we sort of create that sort of thinking mindset, thinking culture, I guess, in an organization?
Right. So it is always boiling to what kind of leadership you have in your business. So probably this is a good time to bring up what economists called and strategists open innovation. So as opposed to closed innovation. So if you are a company, you are bounded by your own firm boundaries. So you engage in some research, you look at the market, engage in some research projects, and then you get to a development stage. The funnel is actually narrowing. In the development stage, you are still bounded by this, not only market forces, but your capabilities within the company. And then you come up with something and go to the market. And when you go to the market, you go in a very narrow field, and you started in a much wider field. So as opposed to open innovation, where you actually employ principles that will lead you to bring in experts from other areas, and then the funnel, working with them. And I have a great example here. Working with them, you can go to the market much wider. So in the old innovation paradigm, if you look at it, it was, well, let's profit from our R&D. We must discover it ourselves, develop it, and ship it ourselves. Well, the open innovation principle says, well, external R&D can create significant value. Internal R&D is also needed to claim that portion of the value. In the closed innovation paradigm, we say we should control our intellectual property so that our competitors don't profit from our ideas. In the open innovation, well, we should profit from others' ideas. We should use others' IPs and maybe buy into others' IPs whenever it advances our business model. In the closed innovation, if we discover it ourselves, we'll get it to the market first, which we know now there is not competitive advantage in that. Whereas the open innovation said, well, we don't have to originate the research to profit from it. And when you look at Intel, for instance, Intel is a semiconductor company, right? In 2017, they acquired Mobileye, an Israeli autonomous vehicle technology company. I'm also a proud Israeli from, as well as a proud Australian. But before they acquired that, they worked for 5 years with Mobileye to develop technology, and they are not in the business of self-driving cars, right? So Intel innovated at its boundaries, right? What we call autonomous innovation, and they are great proponents of open innovation principle, which means that you combine internal and external ideas, right, to get external paths into the market to advance the development of new technologies, right? And you can do this today via corporate venture capital, via talent on demand. This is what, the subject of our discussion hopefully will be today. And via incubator, accelerator, but also via talent on demand. And these people, these experts, they come with an added benefit. They challenge your status quo, they stretch your worldview, they bring new thinking, insights, and possibilities. Then they force you to reassess that institutionalized thinking and dominant logic to be more efficient and widen the funnel of going to the market and not being bound by companies' sort of boundaries.
Yeah, and I think companies are starting to do that. And whether a company buys another partner company to create that sort of more of a tapping into other people's skills and abilities. But if you're a company that, because nobody's going to say they're into closed innovation or restricted their innovation because they perhaps don't even know that. So how do you get a company that perhaps are like that? And I guess firstly is how do we make people aware that actually to be more agile, to be more competitive, you need to sort of create more of an open innovation approach. But then how do we take a company and a culture, because it's a cultural shift as well. It's not just about the, we're going to make some decisions here. It's a cultural thing because it impacts every individual in the organization. How do we take a culture to shift more to that open innovation, which may feel a little bit unnerving to certain people, with outsiders, so to speak, coming in, and perhaps a sense of who's in control of this and where's this information going. So how do we do that, sort of create that sort of culture of open innovation?
Yeah, so I guess it is a matter of leadership. So everything to me comes in the end. There is a level zero ground that is called leadership. So it is a matter of leadership explaining to the workforce that we have to accept some premises. And, an important premise is that we have to become a bit humbler, and we have to realize that it is a statistical reality that best ideas may not necessarily lie inside the company, but outside the company. And sometimes, because, for instance, we are an SME, we need to compete asymmetrically. So if we are located in a region where technological talent is not available, that shouldn't be a problem. You can engage with people in Berlin or Tel Aviv or you name it, Australia, and you get agility into the business. So to me, then you have to think as a leader in the company, well, I have 3 tracks I need to go. One is people, the other one is process, the other one technology. Technology is probably the easiest one to explain to people, because you can say, well, we have these amounts of data. They do not create any competitive advantage. What creates competitive advantage is the manner in which we synthesize. First we extract and then synthesize, so that we can take intelligent decisions across the business. And people understand that. And then we say, well, we don't have that brain power. We don't have that implicit knowledge. And therefore you reach the stage where you have to talk about people and processes. So you have to say, well, in my view, in this company, we want to end up not just with doers, right? We want to end up with co-creators. So if there was a very, very old Charlie Chaplin movie, he was making some, I think, fasteners or something, and he was always doing this and was coming home, was still doing that, right? Well, people don't, in a company or in a business, don't necessarily want to follow. They want to co-create. Therefore, I see a cultural shift going on, so that core employees become a bit more strategic to the business. They become connectors, they become system thinkers rather than just analytical thinkers, and they become more effective. And you can say to them, your value proposition as an employee is also changing. You can repackage work in discrete parts so that they can be delivered by expert or by experts much more efficiently than we can deliver here, and that will free you for doing something more strategic in the business and around the business. Remember, you have to sense well, like Intel with Mobileye, well outside your sector or market, in order to bring innovation, what they call inbound innovation, to bring innovation from outside in, create more IP, and then deliver maybe another competitive move. And of course, with that, you need to have processes, and to amend policies and processes to support this kind of strategic moves. So, in my mind, the modern leaders of today, they need to embrace the exploitation part, which they already do, which is delivering short-term outcomes, as well as the exploration part, which is the long-term strategic positioning of the business. And that is very difficult, because if you are a listed company, you report every 3 months, especially if you are in the US, every 6 months if you are here in Australia. You report to the market, so your short-term horizon is always hanging like a Damocles sword. But that shouldn't, and if it does, that's really bad for you as a business. That shouldn't prevent you to think the long-term strategic positioning of the business and engage in those sometimes very difficult conversations with your business, but explain to them that we're changing everything. We're changing the way we see you and you see us. We will see you as co-creators. We're not going to see you as followers. And we have all these smart guys in Tel Aviv, Berlin, and Silicon Valley who are going to help us to be greater than we are. And I think if you are good at doing that, creating that collective intelligence, creating that social capital, that will give you a head start.
And I guess what we're talking here about in terms of facilitating this sort of process is this whole sort of concept of sort of the blended workforce, isn't it? Where you're bringing in more expertise who are not permanent, they're sort of more on a sort of a gig economy, you call it, and that sort of approach, more flexible. How does, I guess there's some challenges with that, and I guess for me there can be a potential. Is there a higher cost to it? Can it upset other permanent employees who come in who might feel a bit put out? How do we overcome those challenges, which I think are a reality? And we know this whole blended workforce is becoming more of a prominent thing in the last 12 months. And I think it's making companies flex and scale up better because they can sort of bring this added resource in when they need it, and they don't have to invest in sort of permanent initially until they start to build. But how do we overcome those challenges? Because I think there are real challenges in terms of whether it's higher costs or whether it's trying to upset the permanent employees, making sort of they're integrated into the organization.
Yes, yes, there are challenges, and these challenges, I think, they were exacerbated by in the past 12 months at least by COVID. So many companies had to become to operate with a less ideal workforce, and because of that, many people lost their jobs, and businesses also lost because there is no slack in the business anymore to innovate. Everyone is on a cost cutting sort of realm and feeling that does not help. So many companies, I think, right now experience a disconnect between skills and capabilities that are necessary to just surviving and delivering now, and those necessary for long-term positioning. So what's happening is you then go and realize, all right, some of the workforce that used to be with us is not available anymore, because if you look at the people who lost their jobs over the past year or so, there are people who transitioned, there are people who are displaced, there are people who are recalled, and they got your jobs back. But a large amount of people, and especially those in the 28 to 35, and there is a study that shows that across all industry, 28 to 35 bracket, 80% of them transition to do other things, or transition to other companies and so on. And then you ask yourself, well, how do I deliver in the short, medium, and long term? And what I'm saying by that, to put some numbers, in the short term, within the next 3 months, medium, up to the next 6 months, and after beyond that. And then you realize there are specialized tasks as well as general tasks that you can easily find people for the short term. For the medium term is more, as you're saying, more tactical in nature, because it requires a bit more thinking and where you're going, especially if you are involved with accelerators and talent on demand. And then in the long term is more strategic. So in the past, I mean, the past 10, 15 years, you used to have to rely on joint ventures, partnership, and alliances. And people or businesses rely on that less and less because these mechanisms are very difficult to run and not very cost effective and very cumbersome to exit. But others came into the market: innovation labs, corporate venture capital, talent on demand, and we mentioned incubators and accelerators. So in terms of talent on demand, you realize that dialogue that was always on the back of your mind. What am I going to say to the core workforce? That needs to take shape. And
because that's the thing I was thinking about. Because I think from a leadership point of view, I think they get it why they need to have this sort of talent on demand. There's some real benefits for it in terms of agility and speed to market and getting all that skills. Is then how do we maintain, because employee engagement is really a thing at the moment in terms of maintaining employee engagement, and obviously at the moment it can be quite low. And how do you? And I've worked in a blended context within organisations where I've been the experts to come in and worked with teams in various levels to facilitate certain strategic intents, and that some of those companies I've worked for have done it really well in terms of introducing me and how they've done that and my part to play and all that. So how do we maintain that, I suppose, engagement with the employees, that they'll welcome this blended workforce, either individual or team, and really embrace it to make the most of it?
Well, I guess one thing that you need to take into consideration when you have this dialogue is we're going to rely on this blended workforce, but in the same time, we have to put together a knowledge management system that is able to harness some of that implicit knowledge that resides in the brains of these outsiders, as they are called, and harness that for institutional purposes. When you do that, then it's not just the company that benefits; it's also your core workforce, because they would know how to do next time maybe the same thing. So a very simple example that I always give is, just imagine you are a CFO and your company was always as an SME, but now is booming, and you want to go to be listed on the stock exchange, and you don't have that expertise, right? You don't have the IPO expertise, so you go on and get an expert from one of these platforms, someone who's been there, done that unquestionably well. So he comes in. It's not just doing the work for you, right? So he imparts knowledge. And you as a company, if you are successful, and this is one individual, right? But we talk about many others that can work in other places in the company. If you are able to capture that implicit knowledge for your institutionalized purpose, for your next competitive move, then the employees will see the benefit in that. So, and I have this conversation with people who are full-time employees, and to my surprise, you would think that they will regard the experts on demand as outsiders, but that's not true. They usually stay there 6 months or more. Some of them remain on full-time role and so on. The conversations are not difficult, but you have to show your core full-time employee that there is benefit for him, because we are all humans. What's in it for me? What's in it for me? Of course, you are loyal to your company or not, but we are all humans. And when they see that benefit that will touch them in a way that maybe they didn't expect, that's an added benefit. And I think you have a much easier conversation.
And I think you've struck something really important there, is this learning piece. And I think apart from the expert coming in and doing the job they're doing, actually by observing them, being around them, being involved with them, you're going to learn tons from this expert as well, and that can be for the future proofing of your business. And I know when I've been in organizations, other people have picked up on stuff I've done, or a fresh pair of eyes. I've got no baggage of the company for the last sort of 5-6 years. So I've also been in different contexts before. And so I can come in and say things, and I don't have to get too worried about what people think and go, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? So it can give fresh thinking as well. So it's trying to sell it as they're actually going to not only do a job, but they're going to create some real learning. So we're running out of time, unfortunately. It always whizzes by on this show, Dorel. So it'd be great for people to want to connect with you and know a bit more about yourself, but also a bit more about your company. So how can people do that?
Well, they can connect with me via LinkedIn, or they can drop me an email at any time, dorel@cognisium.com. And I welcome these conversations. I think we touched on a few issues that are of real interest, but there is obviously much more to it, and I'm always happy to be part of that dialogue.
Well, brilliant. Well, thank you for coming on today and sharing your insights. It's much appreciated.
Thank you very much. All the best. Bye-bye.